You're so far away there, Stanley.
I know.
Well, here, I'll hold the book up. So
I requested not to be too close to you.
Well, welcome. Let's start, Stanley, talking about the book itself. This is your second cookbook?
Ish. Yeah, because the first book was a book that I really just helped put together for my parents and a friend who's a chef, Johnny Scapin, who's a French-trained Italian chef. He's a northern Italian chef. My parents came from southern Italy, and I thought that it'd be nice to have those two, regions or those areas of Italy combined into one book. And that came out about 13, 14 years ago, something like that. And then we reissued it 2 years ago. But this one I did myself with my wife, so I didn't really actually do it myself.
And what made you decide to do a second one?
I love cooking. I became obsessed with food. I think after I'd always loved food, but after I made Big Night, I had learned quite a bit during the making of the film and writing the film, and I kind of thought that my love affair with food would end, but it didn't. It only got greater. And so I spend a lot of my time writing about food, thinking about food, eating food, cooking food, insinuating myself into different kitchens around the world so I can learn recipes and stuff. I really love it. It's I think also as I get older, I love what I do. I love acting and I love directing and writing and everything, but I find a new kind of creative freedom in the kitchen.
And what are you like to cook with?
I'm okay.
Are you tyrannical, or are you?
That what?
Are you tyrannical? Are
No,
you
I'm
a
not.
director in the kitchen?
At times, yes, but also a lot of times I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing, so it's not, so you can just join into the melee. And there's always wine available, so that helps.
Where did you learn to cook?
I learned from my mother and my grandmother, who were great. This is my, also I have to say, no, my dad's side of the family too. Both sides really, really good cooks. And my mother she's an incredible cook. And my grandmother too. I think had they been maybe of a different generation, they would have done it professionally. But that's where.
What's the difference between writing a script and writing a cookbook?
Well, a script is just pretend. A cookbook is very real. And if the recipes, if you don't test them within an inch of your life, then the book doesn't work. And then that's really embarrassing.
How long did it take you to put together these recipes?
A year, about a year. I'd always made notes about if I did another book, what it would be, and so on and so forth. But then once we decided what it was going to be, it took about a year from start to finish.
Do you ever have enough time in the kitchen to satisfy you?
Yes, without question. There are certain nights when I go, I just can't, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. But I think particularly if something goes wrong, do you know what I mean? If a dish goes wrong and you've spent time working on it, and you think, oh, why am I doing this? It's like you've given a bad performance. There's nothing worse when you're doing a play and there are thousands of people watching, and you feel that you've given a bad performance, and then you walk off stage and you think, I never want to do this again. But of course you have to, so you do it.
What do you enjoy most about cooking, particularly when you get a new recipe?
I like all aspects of it. I like the problem solving of it. I like the sensuousness of it, and I like the mistakes. I like to find out. Making mistakes is a frustrating thing, of course, but that's the only way we ever learn. And it is a safe place to make mistakes in your own kitchen with your kids eating your food. They're not very bright. They don't know. They don't.
It's one thing to write a cookbook and cook at home for your kids. Do you think you could cook professionally? Would you ever be interested in doing that?
No, I couldn't do that.
Why?
I could help somebody cook. Like I would be maybe a good sous chef or a plongeur, which is the lowest of the low. But no, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean,
What-
I would, if I trained, yeah, I could do it. If I really trained to do it, yeah. But right now, no. No one would ever come back to that restaurant.
When you go into a restaurant kitchen, what amazes you the most?
A lot of times, it's the size of the kitchen that amazes me. What people are able to turn out in an incredibly small space with maybe really rudimentary tools. There's a woman who has a restaurant in Putney, which is right near where I live in London, and she doesn't have a gas burner. She has 4 induction burners and a little thing for boiling water and an oven, like this little tiny oven. And she makes some of the best Italian food I've ever had. She's from Sardinia. It's extraordinary. It doesn't even look like a kitchen. It looks like a couple of devices stored in a room.
How has cooking and working on this, how does this inform your acting?
Well, I think, yeah, that's a good question. I think that every art form, and I think cooking is an art form, I think every art form informs every other art form. The thing that, one of the reasons that I made Big Night was because a restaurant put me very much in mind, because I worked in restaurants when I was younger to pay the bills. It put me very much in mind of the theater, where you have the stage, which is the restaurant floor, and then you have the backstage, which is, the kitchen. And the behavior backstage is completely the opposite of the behavior on stage. And that was really interesting to me. And the fact that there was this set menu, which would be the script, and there was a set amount of time in which you had to serve this food when it was ordered to the time it was, So it's a lot of similarities. But I think the great thing about it is that it's also incredibly spontaneous, which is what acting has to be. So acting is all those things. It's a regimented discipline, and yet at the same time, it has to be completely spontaneous. And cooking only informs that. Painting too is the same for me. Every now and again I'll sketch and paint a bit, and one feeds the other. You always learn, and I think you have to get away from. I've had to get away from acting sometimes to understand what it is, why I do it, and how I do it.
What differences are you finding living? I mean, you've been living in London, what, a year and a half?
Yeah,
And from living in New York, what was the biggest adjustment moving to London?
Well, the language. I think, I don't know, it wasn't really, I have to say maybe the biggest adjustment was things are a bit slower. Even though it's an incredibly fast-paced city and an international city, it has a pace that's very different, and I like it. And there's just more space. There's not as much height. I like that.
And how's the food?
Fucking great. I mean, the food in London is just extraordinary. It's very varied. I think you have a much more. You have a great international community. You have the vestiges of the colonies, and British cooking has always gotten a bad rap, but a lot of the recipes in this book are my wife's recipes. She's British, and those recipes are sort of tried and true great British recipes, like beef Wellington and standing rib roast and shepherd's pie, fish and chip. Come on, shepherd's pie. Who doesn't like it? I guess the sheep don't like it, but I find it much more varied in the culinary world than New York, and probably simply because it's bigger and like I said, because of the number of colonies that don't exist anymore, but the people do.
Let's talk a little bit about the films you've got coming out. I know that it's the third Hunger Games film is coming out in November. I'm curious, how long does it take to get into that getup to play your character in the Hunger Games with that elaborate wig and those amazing choppers?
Yeah, it's not that. It's only about 45 minutes or something. It's really the amount of time, it just takes time to put the wig on to make sure it looks right. But the teeth, you pop the teeth in and you put a little makeup on and, and then it's showtime.
And what do you think when you look in the mirror with that getup on?
Well, it's horrifying. I mean, but it's exactly what I wanted. Exactly what I wanted.
What is how big a part does this character play in these last two films?
Not much. He's there to sort of facilitate the plot for all practical purposes.
Were you surprised to be asked to be in something like this?
I was kind of, but I was really happy too. My wife was the one who said, we weren't married at the time, but she's a literary agent, and she had read all the books. And I said, Gary Ross sent me this thing called The Hunger, and I didn't even finish the sentence. She said, do it. She said that's the biggest selling, series of books since Harry Potter. And I read them, and I loved them, and I loved Gary's script. And you signed on for 4 films, and it's at their discretion, of course, if they choose to use you, and luckily they did. It's one of the best experiences I've ever had. Really fun.
Do you get recognized on the street for that, without the wig?
Yes, which is sad. And confusing.
Which is more challenging as an actor, just to perform looking like yourself, or to get into wigs and makeup and big costumes?
No, the makeup and the wigs and that's the easy stuff. Because it's a mask, you put on a mask and then it's easy. But when you're yourself, it's hard. So, which is why, there are different grades of that, but you're never really playing yourself. You're taking from yourself, but you're not playing yourself. But I think that you feel much safer when you have all the accoutrement of the theater or cinema.
You've directed a number of films, but I know that in talking to you over the years, it gets harder and harder to get an independent film off the ground.
Yeah.
How hard is it at this point? Do you have stuff that you would like to get made that you're having trouble with?
Marshall, I wish you wouldn't have asked me that question. That's a depressing answer. Yes, of course I do, and I'm hopefully close. And you and I have talked over the years so many times that I've just talked about the same scripts over and over again, and I still haven't been able to make them because they're esoteric, and the timing has to be right, the cast has to be really right. But I think we're close to doing. I've written a film about Giacometti. And Jeffrey Rush is attached to play Giacometti, and Ryan Reynolds will play his friend and biographer, James Lord. And I hope to shoot it next year in London and Paris. And again, just a small film. It's about a 4 million pounds, so about $6 million or something. So, but just to get, and that's bare bones, because it's period, it's 1960s.
So roughly the food budget on the Hunger Games.
Yeah. Or my trailer on Transformers. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, exactly. But those little movies, it used to be easier. There were more independent film companies around than there are now, although there are others that are starting up now. But it used to be much easier to get money for a small film.
And yet every Friday you see in the New York Times 20 movies reviewed. So somebody's making these movies.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what does that say to you?
Well, it says that I probably don't write very good scripts, I guess, but I don't know. I think there's money coming out of Europe now that wasn't ever there before. I think particularly in Germany and England. England has a huge amount of making a huge number of films, and shooting a lot of American films in England. I don't know. I don't know where the money comes from. I don't know how it happens. I wish I knew.
How concerned are you that there is less and less of an adult audience for movies, for serious movies?
Well, concerned, yeah. Because let's face it, we know what the demographic is, the largest demographic of that go to movies, and we see the movies that people really like. And I'm lucky enough to be in some of them because that's the nature of the business now. But I think one of the things that's really important, that's been a great gift for actors and for filmmakers, is HBO has been crucial, and all the new cable networks and the internet too. I think that things like Netflix, I think it's really important, and we're not going to rely on the movie theater as much as we once did. And I think that that's okay. It's inevitable. What's really important is that there are venues and different conduits for filmmakers to get their work out there, whatever size that screen is. And I hate to say that, but I'm afraid it's just the way it is.
Let me ask you one more question, then we'll open up to questions from the audience. Do you get the same satisfaction from acting now that you did when you started? How has that changed?
From time to time, I do, yeah. I find it hard, I think having kids, and I find it hard to be away from my kids. I don't like to be away from my kids. I do go crazy if I don't work for a while. I took the summer off and for the first time, and it was really nice. But now I'm ready to work again. But I think that I'm ready to direct. I haven't directed a movie in quite a few years. And I have to say, the food world has been drawing me ever I want to indulge myself in it a little bit more. And I find that there's stuff that I'm talking about doing some kind of series about food, some sort of documentary-like series about food, in which I would be very involved. And that's really interesting to me. It's a new sort of creative outlet.
Okay, let's open it up to questions from the audience. If you have a question, raise your hand. Someone will come to you with a microphone. This young lady right here.
Hi, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Love your work. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned there are quite a few British recipes in your book. And I'm wondering if you have any vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, that sort of trend kind of recipes, and what do you think about that in general? Yay or nay?
No, I think yay. I mean, I don't eat gluten, and I don't eat dairy, cow's dairy, simply because I can't eat it. So what we do in the book is there are some vegetarian recipes in there, but there are certain dishes that you can use gluten-free pasta for, and we list a number of them, a number of brands, and I've tested a number of brands to see which ones are the best. So I think it's important. Do I love to eat meat? Yeah. Do I eat it all the time? No. So I just think a varied diet is the most important diet. The Mediterranean diet being probably the most healthy diet.
Hey, thank you for coming. Yeah, you're in so many movies, big budget films, and you have a family to take care of, your books. How do you budget your time so well?
How do I budget my time so well? Well, I think a lot of you just have to take the time when you need to take the time. And I think people also think if you're in 1 year and you have like 4 movies come out in that year and you're in 4 movies, a lot of times you haven't been away for 3 to 5 months making that movie. Transformers, something like that, yes, you're gone for 5 months but you're flying back and forth to see the kids and whatever. But a lot of movies, like I just did this movie that Tom McCarthy directed, I shot in Boston for 1 day, and then I went to Toronto for 10 days, and I worked 4 out of those 10 days, and that was it. And sometimes, like the Hunger Games, you go in and you just work 2 days. Another little movie I did last year, you work a couple of days. They're really nice, chunky scenes, great roles, but a lot of times you just work 2 days. So to go away and to do 3 movies in a row and you're shooting every day, that's kind of a brutal life. But you have to remember, I'm also, I'm not the guy who carries the movie. I'm the character actor. So I get to go home and see my kids, which is, then if the movie fails, it's not my fault. It's Jeremy Renner's fault or something, whatever. Tom Cruise, not my fault.
Over here.
Hi, Stanley.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming. As a parent and as parents reading your cookbook, there are a lot of children these days who are very picky eaters and they eat very brown diets. Do you have any suggestions for parents who read your cookbook, or parents in general, to encourage a more adventurous palate at a young age?
I think the first thing is as little snacking as possible. And if they are snacking, that they're healthy snacks. And I know that's not always easy. I am a firm believer in denying children dessert if they haven't eaten their meal. I think it really, it's hard with kids because they're figuring out what they like. They don't know what they like. One day they like this, the next day they don't like that. They don't know. But I am a firm believer in the denial of dessert. And then I also think that helping them kind of get involved in cooking, which isn't always easy because you're stressed, you're tired, you want to put the food on the table and they have homework or something like that. But I think as much as a parent can, I think that kind of little bit of involvement helps them become more interested in it. We always did, when my kids were little, we had one birthday party because I have twins and then I have one who's 2 years younger. But they're all born in January, so we would just do one big birthday party and we made pizza dough. We'd make bowls and bowls and bowls of pizza dough, and each kid would make their own pizza. So you'd have the table laid out, and they were, the party favors were like, hats and little rolling pins or something that they would decorate or whatever. But it really engaged them, and it really involved them, and it's not that much work to do. But I do think there's, so much junk food and snack food and all that stuff, and it's just awful.
A hungry kid is a pliable kid.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, right. Mine haven't eaten for a week. Yeah.
2 more questions. 2 more?
Well, I have a question, and that is,
You do?
what was the toughest recipe to get right in this book?
Paella.
Why?
Well, it's because it has to do with proportions and timing. And I put 2 different recipes for paella in. One where you can make it on a very large scale if you have the right equipment, and then where you can just make it on a small scale. But I really wanted it to be right, and I've experimented with it over and over again and watched chefs make it and read a lot about it. And so that one, and oddly enough, probably just like a mushroom pasta. I kept changing the recipe over and over again. And even now, when I write it in the book, I made it again recently, and I was like, oh, that's better now. So don't do that one. Don't use that recipe. It's terrible.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Being here. In Big Night, the movie centers around, is it timpano? Am I saying that?
Timpano, yeah.
Timpano. I assume you had the chance to eat that, and I would love to hear, is it as incredible as it looks, and is there a recipe for it in the book?
There's a recipe for it in the other book, in the book that my parents did. That's the sort of centerpiece of the book. We have it every Christmas. It's an incredible dish. I mean, it's really heavy. It's a very old-fashioned, very heavy Italian dish, but it's extraordinary. And there are those people who love it, absolutely love it, and those who can't abide it.
Can you describe it briefly?
Well, it's basically almost like a pizza dough that you put into, let's say, like an enamel basin. And then that's filled with ragu and tiny meatballs and sauce and salami, eggs, pasta, meat sauce, I think I said, cheese. It's fucking endless, what goes in this thing. And then you cover it all up and you bake it and you flip it over, and then it looks like a timpani drum. So actually the way you pronounced it, it was correct, forgive me. Timpano is actually the way it is pronounced. And then you let it cool, and then you slice it. But it's always a delicate balance, because the whole thing can fall apart, or it can stick, it's a big drama every year.
You need a timpani for a drum roll.
That what?
You need a timpani for a drum roll.
Yeah, exactly,
As you cut it.
Yeah.
I think we're...
I was told on the last question, and it's a little bit of a ridiculous question, but I just wanted the opportunity to say I spoke with you, so just humor me. So I love you and all of your films.
Thank
You're
you.
an amazing character actor. But recently, you were in Mr. Peabody and Sherman as the voice of Da Vinci, and I must have seen that with my daughter now, like at least 20 times in the past
it's funny how that
month.
happens, isn't it? Yeah.
She's on repeat every night.
Yeah.
And I would have never, ever guessed that that was your voice. I mean, do you do voiceover work like that often? How did you get that role? Did you seek it out? Did it come to you?
No, they came to me. I've done a lot of animated movies, and I love doing them. It's probably the most fun job an actor can ever have. You don't have to wear any makeup. You go into a recording studio, you just scream and shout and act silly. And then they give you money. And, it's fantastic. You don't have to do anything, It was really fun, and I remember that cartoon from when I was a kid. So I was more than happy to be a part of it. Yeah, but I love doing stuff like that. Thanks.
And I guess we'll call it a day here. I want to thank Stanley Tucci. Thank all of you.
Thank you.